It all began on a night when the usual line between comedy and controversy seemed to blur. John Oliver, known for his sharp tongue and fearless humor, opened his latest show with a line that made the audience do a double take. Melania's 9-month secret might just be the greatest cover-up in presidential history, he said. At first, the room erupted in laughter, as if everyone assumed it was just another outrageous joke meant to get attention. But the words hung in the air, the kind of statement that made people lean forward and pay attention, wondering what on earth could possibly come next. Oliver had always been good at this. He could take something seemingly absurd and make it feel important without ever losing the humor. Tonight was no exception. He didn't just tell the audience about a secret, he made it visual. On his desks sat a strange prop, an exaggerated fake pregnancy belly stuffed with papers labeled Trump secrets. The sight alone was enough to make people chuckle, but the humor had a bite. It wasn't just a belly. It was a symbol of hidden truths, contradictions, and the kind of story that seemed too strange to be real, yet impossible to ignore. The idea Oliver presented was wild. He suggested that Melania Trump had faked a period of pregnancy to cover the real timeline of events involving the Trump family. According to Oliver's carefully crafted narrative, the secret pregnancy was meant to mask a delivery abroad involving Ivanka Trump, hidden from the public. It was a story so outlandish that most people would have laughed it off. But Oliver had a way of making even the most unbelievable ideas feel weighty. He combined humor with evidence, showing clips of past appearances where Melania's belly seemed oddly square or at times seemed to vanish entirely. Each visual, each subtle hint built a world where his joke carried a kind of logic that made the audience lean in. The beauty of Oliver's approach was that it didn't rely on shock alone. It relied on timing, on connecting details, and on the way he could layer absurdity with subtle observations. To the casual viewer, it was funny, maybe ridiculous, but for those paying closer attention, there was a pattern, a thread that made the entire segment feel like it had a purpose. Every piece of the joke, the props, the clips, the delivery was designed to draw attention not just to what was being said, but to how carefully words and appearances could be analyzed. It was comedy, yes, but it was also clever commentary on the nature of public life and hidden truths. Meanwhile, across the nation, Donald Trump was not laughing. When the episode aired, he immediately reacted on Truth Social, his preferred platform for responding to criticism. "Fake leaks. Barron is my son. Melania raised him perfectly," he wrote in all caps. The message was quick, furious, and unmistakably personal. Trump's reaction confirmed one thing: the joke had landed exactly where Oliver had wanted it to. The humor was no longer confined to a television screen. It had spilled into real-world confrontation. The president himself had engaged, and that engagement would set off a chain of events no one could have ignored. What made this exchange even more compelling was the tension it created. Here was a comedian making bold claims about one of the most powerful families in the country, using humor, props, and clips. And there was the president known for his fiery personality and unwillingness to back down, responding in real time. The collision was inevitable. It wasn't just about a joke. It was about credibility, ego, and the clash between carefully constructed narratives and spontaneous reactions. It was a situation that combined tension, humor, and curiosity in equal measure, pulling viewers into a story that felt larger than the segment itself. Oliver had a knack for making complicated ideas simple, for showing how tiny details could reveal a bigger picture. The fake belly, for instance, wasn't just a prop. It was a metaphor for how public appearances can be deceiving and how even small inconsistencies can be used to craft a story. By highlighting Melania's appearances and the supposed square belly, Oliver turned something ordinary into evidence, something playful into a pointed observation. It was this kind of storytelling, using humor as a lens to examine reality, that made the segments so captivating. The audience didn't just laugh, they thought, they guessed, and they debated what might be real and what was exaggeration. At the same time, Trump's response amplified the moment. By reacting so quickly, he unintentionally gave Oliver more fuel. Every word Trump typed or spoke was a real-world clip, a moment that could later be replayed and examined. His denial, framed as a defense, immediately became part of the story. The president's own statements were now woven into the comedy, creating a feedback loop where the joke and reality collided. What was supposed to be absurd commentary suddenly had consequences, showing how public figures, no matter how powerful, are always at the mercy of their own words. By the end of the opening segment, the tone was set. The audience was laughing, curious, and aware that something bigger was unfolding. Oliver had transformed what might have been just another joke into a story with tension, drama, and stakes. The fake pregnancy belly, the clips, and the outrageous theory all came together to make people question not just the narrative, but also how words, actions, and appearances can be interpreted over time. And Trump, by reacting, had unwittingly joined the story, ensuring that this was no longer just a comedy sketch. It was the beginning of a public confrontation that everyone would remember. In that moment, it became clear John Oliver had done more than make people laugh. He had created a story where humor and reality intersected, where even the most absurd claims could lead to real consequences. And Trump, in his characteristic way, had played right into it, setting the stage for a night that would be talked about long after the episode ended. It was a simple setup, but the layers of humor, observation, and human reaction made it unforgettable. After the explosive opening, the story didn't stop. It escalated quickly. John Oliver had set the stage, but the real drama began when the subject of the segment responded. Donald Trump, known for his quick temper and fiery responses, immediately fired back on Truth Social. Fake leaks. Barron is my son. Melania raised him perfectly, he declared. The message was short, angry, and unmistakably personal. It was a defensive move meant to shut down the joke before it gained traction. But in reality, it had the opposite effect. By responding so quickly, Trump had confirmed the significance of Oliver's claims and had thrown himself into the spotlight as part of the story. Oliver didn't stop with one line or one joke. He built the narrative, stretching the humor while weaving in details that made it feel almost believable. He showed clips of Melania's past appearances, carefully chosen moments where her pregnancy seemed unusual. At times, her belly looked perfectly square. At other times, it seemed to disappear entirely. Oliver described it as the most dramatic method acting of the century, and the audience roared with laughter. What was incredible about the segment wasn't just a joke. It was the way Oliver had taken tiny, seemingly ordinary details and turned them into evidence for a story that entertained while making people think. The tension came from how real the stakes suddenly felt. This wasn't just comedy anymore. It had crossed into reality. Here was the President of the United States publicly denying something a comedian had suggested, and in doing so, providing material for more jokes. Trump's statement, meant to close the conversation, gave Oliver the perfect opening to build on his point. Every time the president tried to assert control, he added another piece of content that could be used in Oliver's story. Each denial became evidence in itself, creating a loop where the more Trump protested, the more amusing and damning the segment became. Trump's response was characteristically aggressive. He didn't just deny Oliver's claims, he attacked him personally. John Oliver is a low-energy loser from across the pond, a complete disaster. He makes up stories because he's jealous. Sad guy, Trump wrote. The statement had all the hallmarks of his usual style. A mix of insult, dismissal, and bravado. But the problem for Trump was that his words didn't count to the story, they enhanced it. The more he tried to defend himself, the more Oliver could highlight contradictions and inconsistencies using Trump's own language against him. It was a situation where words became both weapon and weakness. The audience watching Oliver could feel the layers building. On one hand, they were laughing at the absurdity, the fake belly, the secret deliveries, the dramatic exaggeration. On the other hand, They were witnessing a real confrontation unfold in front of them. Oliver had created a situation where comedy and reality intertwined, and viewers found themselves hanging on every detail. The narrative was no longer just about Melania's supposed secret. It was about how one person's words could create an unstoppable chain reaction when scrutinized closely. As the segment progressed, Oliver's technique became clear. He didn't rely on rumors or fabricated stories. He relied on the careful selection of details and the reactions they provoked. Each clip of Melania, each pointed joke about her perfectly square belly, each sarcastic comment about hidden secrets was crafted to create tension and amusement at the same time. And with Trump's reactive statements fueling the fire, the story gained momentum. Every defensive post, every angry dismissal added layers to the narrative, making it impossible for the audience to ignore the unfolding drama. The brilliance of the back and forth lay in how natural it all seemed. There was no heavy-handed accusation, no complicated explanation. Oliver let the evidence speak, even if that evidence was hidden in humor and visual cues. Trump, in contrast, tried to control the narrative, but every attempt to do so played right into Oliver's hands. It became a lesson in how public figures, especially those who speak often and confidently, can unintentionally create their own challenges. In this case, the more Trump tried to shut down the joke, the more material he provided for it to grow. By the time the segment was halfway through, the pattern was clear. Oliver presented the theory, Trump denied it, and the denial itself became part of the story. This cycle created a rhythm that was both funny and compelling. The audience was hooked not just because of the absurdity, but because they were watching a real interaction unfold. A clash between a president trying to defend his family and a comedian using evidence, wit, and timing to challenge him. The humor came from both sides, but the tension came from the knowledge that this was not scripted. Every word mattered, and every reaction built on the last. The segment also highlighted a larger truth about communication and public perception. Trump's immediate reaction on social media showed how high-stakes interactions can spiral quickly. A single post intended to shut down a joke can instead validate it, especially when the audience is ready to scrutinize and interpret every detail. Meanwhile, Oliver demonstrated how observation, patience, and well-placed evidence can turn even absurd claims into a compelling story. In a sense, both sides were teaching the audience something about influence, language, and the power of words, even if one side was doing it intentionally and the other accidentally. By the end of the exchange, it was evident that the back and forth had become the story itself. Oliver had managed to take a wild, humorous claim and transform it into a narrative that felt tense, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. Trump's responses had ensured that the confrontation was dynamic, with each statement adding energy to the segment. What started as a joke about a fake pregnancy had turned into a study in how words, reactions, and timing can create moments of both humor and insight. The audience was laughing, but they were also captivated, watching a real clash of personalities and ideas unfold in front of them. And in that unfolding story, the rules were clear. In a battle of words, every statement matters. The more Trump tried to fight back, the more material Oliver had to make his point. Each denial, each angry post, each insult added to the comedy, creating a situation where the audience was not just entertained. They were witnessing an unexpected lesson in the power of language, perception, and timing. What began as a joke about Melania's secret had become a masterclass in how humor and reality can collide with consequences far beyond the screen. The night had already been building like a storm, with John Oliver carefully layering jokes, clips, and absurd theories about a supposed secret pregnancy. Donald Trump had responded with anger and denial, firing off posts and statements meant to shut down the narrative. But the turning point, the moment when the story shifted from funny to unforgettable, arrived quietly, almost like a click in a clock. It happened when Trump, in his usual confident and combative style, declared, "Ridiculous, totally false, never happened." Those words were meant to stop the conversation in its tracks, to assert control over a situation that had quickly spun beyond his reach. But instead of ending the segment, they opened a door. John Oliver seized the moment, and in doing so turned what could have been a simple joke into something much bigger. With a calm, almost subtle motion, Oliver cut to an old interview where Trump had boasted, "I have great genes, the best genes, they're all in the family." The audience erupted in laughter. What had been a simple denial from Trump was instantly undermined by his own words from years earlier. He had tried to erase the claim with a simple sentence, yet in doing so, he had handed Oliver the perfect weapon. This was the moment when the night truly changed. Each denial from Trump no longer felt like a strong defense. It felt like a setup. Every time he tried to assert himself, to prove that Oliver was wrong, his own past statements could be used to contradict him. What had started as a playful segment about a secret pregnancy now became a demonstration of how public figures, no matter how confident, can be trapped by their own words. The audience could see the pattern forming in real time, and the humor turned sharper, more pointed, and more irresistible. Trump's reaction to this was predictable, yet compelling. He doubled down on his anger, posting more statements online and repeating his denials in interviews. "He's got nothing, absolutely nothing," he insisted. Each time he did, it created another opportunity for Oliver to bring up clips that contradicted him. Every boast Trump had ever made about his family, his achievements, or his judgment was suddenly fair game. It was no longer just a joke. It was a full confrontation where words had become the battleground and logic was the weapon. The tension grew not just because of what Oliver showed, but because of how effortlessly the clips worked. The contrast between Trump's denials and his own previous statements was stark, almost comedic in its clarity. When Trump claimed that something never happened, the audience could see on the screen that he had bragged about the same thing years earlier. When he insisted that all accusations were false, clips of his past claims seemed to speak for themselves. The humor was undeniable, but beneath the laughter was a lesson in accountability. The more someone speaks, the more likely it is that their words can be used against them. At this point, the story had transformed into something bigger than a comedy segment. It became a showcase of how repetition, confidence, and public statements interact. Trump had tried to outsmart a comedian, but in doing so, he had revealed something important about himself. The very confidence that he relied on as a strength could also be a weakness. Every attempt to control the narrative, every angry post, and every denial became fuel for Oliver's story. The audience could see it unfold like a pattern, a chain reaction where humor and reality collided in real time. Even more remarkable was how the audience responded. They weren't just laughing at a joke. They were watching a dynamic interplay between words, perception, and consequence. Oliver didn't need to invent scandals or dig up new secrets. He simply used what was already available. Trump's own statements recorded for all to see. Each denial became a stepping stone in the narrative, building a rhythm that was both hilarious and revealing. It was a reminder that public figures leave trails of evidence with every word they speak, and those trails can sometimes speak louder than any argument. As the segment continued, the momentum only increased. Trump's own words, his brash style, and his refusal to back down all became part of the story. Each clip Oliver played, each reference to an old statement, highlighted how the president had painted himself into a corner. The more Trump tried to assert control, the more the contradictions piled up. Every confident assertion, every personal attack on Oliver became an example of the larger point. When you speak with certainty, your past words can be used to challenge you. The audience could almost feel the tension rising, as if they were witnessing a chess match where one player kept moving pieces that trapped himself. This moment also revealed the power of timing and observation. Oliver knew exactly when to cut to each clip, how long to hold a shot of Trump speaking, and when to let the contrast between past and present speak for itself. The humor was subtle but precise, growing sharper with each contradiction. And Trump, by reacting immediately and passionately, unknowingly provided the material that made the segment so compelling. It was a perfect example of how comedy and reality can intersect and how one can enhance the other in unexpected ways. By the end of this pivotal point in the night, it was clear that the story had shifted. Trump's confident denials were no longer a show of strength. They were evidence in Oliver's narrative. Each boast, each proud statement, each past declaration became a mirror reflecting the inconsistencies between claim and reality. The audience didn't just laugh at the absurdity, they recognized the larger lesson. Words have power, and sometimes the truth reveals itself not through revelation, but through careful attention to what has already been said. In that instant, what had started as a segment about a fake pregnancy transformed into a larger story about accountability, language, and the way public figures navigate truth and perception. The turning point was clear. Trump had tried to outsmart Oliver, but the moment he opened his mouth or posted on social media, he had unknowingly armed the very story he hoped to stop. From that point forward, the evening was no longer about the original joke. It was about how one person's words repeated and analyzed could shape a narrative far beyond what they ever imagined. Once the turning point had passed, the situation grew wilder by the minute. Donald Trump, in his usual way, refused to stay silent even as every word he spoke seemed to feed the story against him. Each angry post on Truth Social, each denial in an interview became more than just a reaction. It became part of the narrative that John Oliver was building. The chaos wasn't just for show. It was real, unfolding in a way that blurred the line between comedy and confrontation. The brilliance of the night was in how every action from Trump became material for Oliver's segment. When the president insisted that all claims were false, the audience immediately saw clips contradicting him. When he accused Oliver of jealousy or low energy, Oliver was ready with past statements where Trump had bragged about being the most energetic, the smartest, and the most capable in every room. Every denial, every insult, every attempt to control the narrative only amplified the comedy. What Trump thought would stop the story had instead made it impossible to ignore. Viewers could sense the tension growing. It wasn't just about the fake pregnancy or the supposed secrets. It was about the way a public figure, someone used to commanding attention, could become entangled in their own words. Trump's statements, intended to assert control and shut down the jokes, instead became proof of inconsistency. The audience could watch almost in real time how confidence and bluster could backfire when scrutinized against a record of past statements. Oliver, for his part, treated the situation like a master storyteller. He didn't need to uncover anything new. The material was already there. He pieced it together, showing clips of Trump's boasts, denials, and statements side by side. Each juxtaposition was like a mirror reflecting contradictions back at the president. Trump had built a world where every word carried weight. And now that weight was being used to create humor, tension, and insight all at once. The more Trump raged, the more fuel Oliver had. Clips of old interviews showed Trump praising his own judgment, claiming perfect timing, or boasting about family achievements, all directly opposing the denials he now shouted. Each segment of the show revealed that the president's words, spoken with confidence in the past, could now be wielded against him with precision. The audience laughed, but they also recognized a pattern. Public statements can't simply be wished away. The more forceful the denial, the more obvious the contradiction becomes. By the middle of the night, the chaos had reached its peak. Reporters pressed Trump at events, asking questions he clearly didn't want to answer, yet he couldn't resist taking the bait. "He's got nothing, absolutely nothing," he said, refusing to concede. Even as each statement only strengthened Oliver's point, what could have been a simple exchange of words had turned into a spectacle where logic, humor, and human ego collided. It was messy, it was loud, and it was utterly captivating. At the heart of the chaos was a lesson about power and communication. Trump, accustomed to commanding attention, found himself outmaneuvered not through confrontation or strategy, but through the careful assembly of his own words. Oliver didn't invent scandals or create new secrets. He allowed Trump's statements to speak for themselves. Each boast, each insult, each denial became part of the story, and as the audience watched, they realized something remarkable. Words carry consequences, and no amount of anger or repetition can erase them. By the end of this part of the night, the combination of chaos and comedy had created something unforgettable. Trump's attempts to fight back only built the narrative further, while Oliver's timing and precision transformed the segment into a masterclass in how public figures can unintentionally provide their own material. The humor was relentless, but beneath it lay a powerful truth. Even the most confident, most forceful speaker is vulnerable when every word they've ever spoken can be compared, analyzed, and replayed. The chaos of the night wasn't random. It was the natural result of words meeting scrutiny and comedy meeting reality. By the time the night drew to a close, the story had fully transformed. What started as a seemingly outrageous joke about a fake pregnancy had evolved into a lesson about words, power, and the consequences of what we say. John Oliver had turned humor into a spotlight, revealing something that no amount of anger or denial could hide. The truth of Donald Trump's own words. Every boast, every confident claim, every denial from the president became part of a chain reaction that proved impossible to stop. Trump had tried to outsmart a comedian, convinced that he could brush off the jokes with ridicule and attacks. He had relied on his usual confidence, his reputation for commanding attention, and his belief in his own persuasive power. Yet each time he opened his mouth or posted online, he provided more fuel for the story. Every statement that was meant to defend him only reinforced the contradictions Oliver had highlighted. The irony was unavoidable. The more Trump attempted to control the narrative, the more he became the story itself. For the audience, the lesson was clear, even amid the laughter. John Oliver had not uncovered hidden scandals or secret documents. He didn't rely on trickery or deception. Instead, he used what was already available. Trump's public statements repeated over the years and now juxtaposed in ways that exposed contradictions and highlighted exaggeration. This approach made the segment both entertaining and enlightening. People were laughing at the absurdity of a fake pregnancy story, but they were also seeing a masterclass in how words and credibility function in the real world. The unfolding confrontation also revealed the limits of denial. Trump had shouted, "He's got nothing, absolutely nothing," and yet with every word, Oliver demonstrated otherwise. Past statements, bragging about family, claiming unparalleled judgment, or insisting on perfection in every endeavor, were now evidence that contradicted his denials. In this moment, it became obvious that confidence alone is not enough to protect someone from scrutiny. Words once spoken take on a life of their own, and even a president cannot fully control how they are remembered or interpreted. By the end, the narrative came full circle. Oliver didn't need to attack. He simply let Trump's words speak for themselves. Each clip, each juxtaposition, each contradiction told the story more clearly than any commentary could. It was a lesson in the power of consistency, in how public statements can either build credibility or undermine it. For Trump, who had tried to assert dominance through anger and denial, the result was unambiguous. His own words had undone him. The audience could sense the finality of the moment when Oliver delivered the closing line, "Mr. President, you're fired by logic." It was a clever echo of Trump's own famous phrase, but now it carried a deeper meaning. The humor landed perfectly, but beneath the laughter was a sober truth. Anyone, no matter how powerful, is accountable to their words. The story wasn't just about a joke, a denial, or a confrontation. It was about the enduring weight of language and the inevitability of consequences. What made this confrontation so compelling wasn't only the personalities involved. It was the universality of the lesson. Words matter. Confidence is not a shield. Denial cannot erase what has already been said. The story resonated because it illustrated something we all understand on a basic level. Once something is out in the world, it can be used, examined, and remembered in ways we might never expect. The audience laughed, but they also recognized a profound truth about accountability, perception, and the consequences of public speech. In the end, Trump had tried to outsmart John Oliver, but the result was the opposite. Oliver's careful, witty assembly of evidence had created a narrative that even the president could not control. Trump's statements, posted and spoken with authority, ended up serving the story rather than stopping it. Humor, timing, and the undeniable weight of past words turned the confrontation into something unforgettable. The night closed with clarity, laughter, and an undeniable lesson. Words are powerful, and sometimes the most effective way to reveal the truth is to let someone's own words speak for themselves.